Welcome to another episode of the show where we interview the storytellers, the hustlers, and the outcasts of the world. Today's guest, and I know I've said it on a couple occasions because when I interview people or I approach people for interviews, it is people that I truly am interested in, and I love their story, and I've studied them. I'm a fan of their work. And today's guest is, how would I describe him? I mean, I would say, on our flyer, our poster, it says Ambassador of Rocky Land. I would say ambassador. I would say Rocky expert. I would say fanatic in a very loving way. And I would even go as far as to say a historian of everything Rocky. But, growing up, I've idolized, much like a lot of kids growing up in the 80s and 90s. I've idolized Rocky. I've watched all the movies. I thought I knew everything about Rocky up until I met our guest today. I'd like to introduce Mike Kunda, and I think, Mike Kunda, please, in your best Rocky voice, just kind of say hi to us.
Yo, it's the show. How you doing today?
I love it. It's weird because sometimes I watch your videos and I'm like, wait a minute, I know it's not Sylvester Stallone, but damn, he sounds just like him. I don't know who I'm watching right now.
Most people just ask me if I've taken my meds for the day. Because sometimes I get accused, I don't know where Rocky stops and Mike starts.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. That's been
Sure.
a question that's been brought up a bunch of times.
Sure.
I just wanted to thank you for, taking the time out of your busy schedule during quarantine, like all of us. I'm sure you're running all over the place and joining us today for an interview. Thank you so much.
No, this is great. Are you kidding me? I always love talking about Rocky. It is my favorite subject. And, you've got a passion for the characters. So, hey, man, let's talk Rocky.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so first of all, the show stands for Storytellers, Hustlers, and Outcasts. And
I do, yeah.
It's kind of rare that I interview someone that kind of relates to all three of them, but I'm going to ask you the question,
sure.
Which do you relate them to the most, storyteller, hustler, or outcast?
Outcast first and foremost.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
Outcast. That now let me just say something about that. If you were to ask my family, specifically my wife, she would be very angry with me that I see myself that way. I am first and foremost an outcast. They would say storyteller, but I will put that second.
But you've hustled to get where you are today, right?
Well, you can't get anywhere in this world without the hustle. You gotta have the hustle, because if you ain't got the hustle, you ain't got nothing. Because nothing is given to us. What does Rocky say in Balboa? It ain't about how hard you hit. If you know what you're worth, go and get what you're worth. That's the thing. You got to go out and hustle. The world's not going to meet you halfway. You got to go for it.
Over the top quote. I like that.
Yo, there you go.
So let's take it from the beginning, Mike. How was it for you as a kid growing up in the 70s and the 80s? Because I know you've talked about being bullied and, feeling like an outcast, but kind of tell us your life growing up, childhood-wise.
So I was born in 1968 in a little town north of Philadelphia called Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I come from a very, very lower middle-class family at that time. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of love for my brother and I. And it's one of the things I talk about often. I never had to worry about the bills not being paid. We always had a summer vacation, even if it was to the Jersey Shore. There was always Christmas underneath the Christmas tree, Christmas presents underneath the tree. So my parents had done their absolute best with their skill set in life, And that's where it started for me. It's about what type of parents bring you into this world. So many of us are not given that opportunity. We're born to maybe less than ideal situations. Anyways, growing up, I had a great imagination, and my first heroes were Zorro and the Lone Ranger. And when I was a kid, I was a little kid, about 8 years old, I was rather tiny. I'm only 5'10", and at the time, I was about 3'1", and so, I was a bullseye for kids on the schoolyard. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, and many people listening to this, I'm sure can relate. So, my dad, he retired a master tailor, and he was really a Michelangelo with a needle and thread. So he would cobble together sombreros and some type of hat and maybe a poncho of some sort, and I would whatever it was, I would have some type of a look. Well, when I got into the Lone Ranger and Zorro, he would take old clothes, shower curtains, towels, whatever it was. He would put it all together, and that would be my Halloween costume. But the problem was, I didn't think anybody would like me. So I would wear these costumes year-round every day. And kids thought I was weird. So right away I was pushed. I was an outcast. I was pushed out at a very early age. I didn't really have a lot. I had some friends, but most of them were outcasts like me. One guy had one arm shorter than the other. They would call him Father Time. One guy had like a hair lift. You know what I mean? I was out with outcasts. Yeah. And you know how kids are. They're just inherently cruel at that age. But they are, because they don't understand the complexities of life. So during this time, my mom had finally she went back to work once my brother and I were a certain age, and I had been collecting Superman comics. And in the Superman comics, obviously, Clark Kent wears his uniform, Superman uniform, underneath his work clothes. So I thought, well, boy, wouldn't that be interesting? So my mom bought me my first Superman outfit when I was a kid, and I would proceed to wear that underneath my school clothes. And, of course, I would look like all jumbled to school. So one day on the schoolyard bully sees that there's something amiss, rips the shirt, out pops the cape. Everybody's making fun of me. So by the time I'm 11 years old, I kept running home every day after school because I would get myself in trouble with my big mouth because it's all I had to fight back with. Because I don't know what it was. It wasn't my parents' fault. I had a tick. I could not stand up for myself. I did not have that confidence. I don't know, it was a switch that never got turned on. So by the time I was 11 years old, my dad had heard of several fights that didn't go my way. And he comes home from work, and he says, Mikey, Sunday, this weekend, it was February 1979, Rocky is going to be on television. What's Rocky? Well, it's about this fighter. He's Italian, we're Italian. He's not the greatest fighter in the world, but he keeps trying. He's very determined, and maybe it's something you could use to help you. And at the time, my dad held his fist like a boxer's, suggesting, well, maybe it will help you fight on the schoolyard. So I said, hey, it's your dad. You know, your mom and dad, they are your North Star. They're your compass as a child. And even as an adult, they become your compass as well. Trust me. So, anyways, he puts it on, and that night, those big white letters from the top of the TV to the bottom of the TV scroll across, and you hear bum 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 bum. Oh my God!
We've all heard that before.
Totally, something happened to me that night. Literally, Rocky became tattooed on my heart. It never ever left. So that night I went to bed, but not before I grabbed a gray sweatshirt and a magic marker. I wrote Italian Stallion on the back of the sweatshirt, and I wore it to school the next day because I have to become part of the character. I must become what I have now idolized. So I wear it to school the next day, and it, nobody really noticed, nobody really picked up on it except the teacher. And back in the 70s, the teachers could slap you, kick you, humiliate you. That's just the way it was in the 70s. And so I didn't get that treatment, but they did. The one teacher, because I was a bit of a loudmouth in class, and they dragged me up into the front of the class, and, well, they had a little bit of fun teasing me, and they told the class, the teacher said, can you tell us what's wrong with Kunda's sweatshirt? And no one knew. And as he turns me around like a ballerina, which is never good at that age, he says, Italian stallion is spelled incorrectly. So now I'm an idiot that can't spell, and I have this. I'm dressing like superheroes. Okay, so and Rocky. Anyways, by the time I was 13, I got into a bunch of more fights, and my grandfather, who was an old Scranton coal miner, he had really broad shoulders. He called me up to his house one night. It was in November. I think I was like 13 or 14. And he says, Mikey, I know you're having troubles at school. And he goes, I know you got this new hero, Rocky. He goes, I got something that may help you. And he goes into his closet and he pulls out his old black fedora and leather jacket, and I put it on. And it was a little big on me because, like I said, he had big shoulders. But I had been watching Rocky on television and VCR now for a little bit. So I got into the gym, and I was just starting to move the weights around. My dad made a little makeshift gym, as many dads did back then, the good dads anyways. And so wearing 3 or 4 sweaters, I could wear the leather jacket. I would then put the hat on, and I would walk around the streets of Scranton at night in the fall, and I would have a Walkman on, and I would angle the headset so I could wear the hat, and I had audio recorded Rocky. So I would listen to it, I would stop the recording, and then I would, yo, Adrian, yo, Paulie, hey, you coming with me today? Yeah? So I would just go back and forth, and I would hit rewind, play, and I would get the mannerisms and the inflection and the timbre of Stallone's Rocky, and I didn't know that was going to get me anywhere. I mean,
I didn't know it started at an early age. I didn't
very early.
That it went that early. Now, when you were saying that you know, in front of the teacher and everything, do you think you were a target partly because, you know, like you said, I was a loudmouth, maybe class clown? Would they have picked
100%.
on you if you were more of a quiet, timid person, you think? How was it back then?
No, you are 100% correct. Had I just kept my mouth shut and, you know, failed out, because I was a horrible student, had I just failed quietly, nobody would have said boo to me. But when you're afraid to use your fist, you don't want to get hit and you don't want to inflict pain on anybody else. The only thing left you have is your mouth until you get punched in your mouth. So that was a valuable learning lesson for me at the time, I guess you could say.
Well, you do have Italian, right? I think that's what we need.
Yes.
So,
yeah, I'm Italian and Polish, yes.
Yeah, is the Italian blood, is that a real thing, the Italian temper? Or
you know, I hear this all the time. I have Italian friends. I know men and women who are Italian say, what are you talking? It's an Italian thing, vendetta. No, it's not. That's all crap. Don't listen to anybody that says it's an Italian thing. Listen, I know plenty of German, Polish, and Irish people who had way worse vendettas than Italians, okay? It's just because the mob is largely glorified as being Italian. There's an Irish mob and a Polish mob and everything. So, you know, listen, it's just who you are as a personality. It's the environment you've been raised in. So, you know, no offense to any of the Italians that pride themselves on having vengeance and being angry, but listen, there's a lot of angry people and they ain't Italian.
I'm glad you cleared that up, and I'm pretty sure a lot of Italians listening to this right now are pretty happy that you cleared that one up, right? The stigma,
hey, yo, David,
stereotype.
I'm a lover, not a fighter. You know what I mean? In real life, the last thing I want to do, I don't want to fight with anybody. I got way too much love to give at my heart, man. I don't want to argue about nothing.
Amen to that.
That's
I think, you know, your story, I mean, starts off, like every time you tell me your story, and as you just told me about the whole going up in front of the class and the Superman cape underneath, it sounds like one day this is going to turn into a movie. I swear to God. I'm just going to throw it out there so that I get, you know, maybe a 5% cut in about 5 or 10 years. But I mean, that's the making of a movie, don't you think?
Well, I wrote a pretty interesting script. I wrote a script, and who knows, maybe one of these days I'll get it to the right person.
Now, you know, you talked about your fascination with Rocky began and your dad introducing you to him. And
yeah.
Every time I watch your content, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people, well, maybe not a lot of people would wonder as much as I do. I tend to analyze things, but what is the comparison between the man and the character Sylvester Stallone and Rocky? Like, I know you have admiration for both of them, but how would you explain the difference in your admiration? Do you have more for one than the other?
So you can't have one without the other, right? Rocky doesn't exist if Sylvester Stallone doesn't believe in himself. If Sylvester Stallone is not determined in the face of adversity, a crooked lip, and a speech impediment. If he was not and he wants to become an actor, it's a medium where you have to, at the time, look more like Burt Reynolds, Robert Redford, Ryan O'Neal. You have to be a pretty boy, and Sylvester is not that. So what is he going to do? He has a slur when he talks, right? And his lip is crooked. Now, today, it has become his trademark. But then it was an impediment. They kicked him out of office after audition. And did he quit? No. He kept right on going. He kept right on persevering because that's what he does. He perseveres because of his determination. So, here's what Sly told me. The best parts of his heart, the most noble part of his being is in Rocky, and that is Rocky has sprung from the best parts of himself. So, I don't know. I mean, I think we are all noble. I don't think I've ever met a person who's as noble as Rocky. I certainly am not. I try to live up to it. I fail miserably every day, but I certainly try to live up to that nobility. I think the thing I take from Stallone is the absolute determination. He was no better or no worse than many, many other actors out there. But he was far more determined than any other actor with his attributes and disabilities.
Yeah. I remember hearing his story where he was he literally was in a room writing the script, and he said that the room was so small, was probably like a motel or something, that he literally could reach the window and the doorknob from his bed. Have you heard about that one?
It's true. Of course.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Gosh.
Yeah,
you know, I think I think when you're comparing two, you're comparing the actor and you're comparing the character. I grew up a big wrestling fan. WWF, Hogan, Mr. T, you know, all that whole era. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. And
Macho
well, you even got
Man.
the Macho Man impression too.
I love Randy Macho Man. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but yes, I
still.
Oh, he was unbelievable. But that was him. What was it, Lenny Poffo, right? That was who he was in real life. He was the Macho Man. He was out of his mind.
But you know, the cool thing about him is his character was pretty much dead set. Was pretty much similar to his real life persona.
Yeah, very much so.
He was savage. I mean, if you put it that way.
Yeah.
You know, and
you didn't mess with him.
A lot of people get confused with, you know, when I guess they have a quote that says, "Don't meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed." Right?
I've heard that.
Right, and I think people are disappointed because they can't separate the two. So if you're a big fan of, I don't know, I know we're going to talk about Sly a lot. Let's use someone else. Let's say Schwarzenegger, right? And,
yeah.
You know, you expect him to be that kindergarten cop character, and then when you meet him, he's not, because he's a normal man, just like all of us.
Right, yeah.
You know, so people get confused with two. So for you, do you gravitate more towards the character or towards the man, you think, if you have to choose?
Up until about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, it was Rocky. It was Rocky. Because I believe Rocky, even as I speak to you now, Rocky is what should be on the pedestal, not Sylvester Stallone. I've told Stallone that to his face.
That's interesting.
I've told him that in a very loving way. By no means did I mean any disrespect by it. And he agreed. He goes, "Oh, you're right. He goes, I'm more flawed than most people. He goes, Rocky is who goes on that pedestal, not me. And so, but then I've had a very unique and interesting last 10 years of my life, 11 years, where I've been able to become friends with Stallone and get to know him. So, you know, there's a human being underneath the hat of Rocky or the bandana of Rambo. There is someone who lurks, who is very complicated, who is a real, no more complicated than you or I. So, because I feel I know a fair amount of Rocky, I'm looking forward to having some conversations about Sly and maybe some questions that are not necessarily Rocky related.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, as a kid, you don't care about the man. You don't care about the actor, right? Which makes sense.
No, right, totally.
You know, Superman, you don't really care about Clark Kent, but you do care about Superman. You don't idolize the person behind it. I think, and this is just coming off of what I'm thinking just right now, is maybe you might relate to the person behind the character, but then the character becomes the person that you always wanted to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because same thing with Spider-Man, right? He was a kid, he got bullied, you know, and he Clark Kent, same thing, more of a shy introvert. You relate to that, but then the character is kind of who you want to be, yeah, wouldn't you say? Sort of? Yeah,
very much so. Again, Rocky is the best in all of us. I've always compared like Rocky and Rambo. Rocky and Rambo are opposite sides of the same coin. Rocky is what we do with love in our hearts, in the light. It's what we aspire to be. Rambo is the darkness. Rambo is what puts us in that corner with no light, and we have no option. We must fight back alone. And so they really could be brothers. Rocky and Rambo could be brothers who had diverged in their paths in life. So I think it says something about the fan who is more a Rocky fan, or they are more of a Rambo fan, if that makes sense.
God, can you imagine an Odd Couple parody with Rambo and Rocky?
Oh, that's my brother. That's my brother and I. My brother is the Rambo in the family, and I'm obviously the Rocky. But yeah, could you imagine if Stallone did one of those movies where he films half the movie as Rocky and then another half as Rambo? I mean, come on.
Oh, my God. Come on, Stallone. Give us something for that. That's a script right there. Jesus.
I mean, if nothing else, Damon, maybe Netflix.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a miniseries. Rocky and Rambo go grocery shopping. Rocky and Rambo pay the rent. You know what I mean?
I would be the first to jump on that right there. Oh, my gosh.
I know. It could be interesting. Even if they did a 1-hour special, what would it be like for Rocky and Rambo to come full circle? I don't know. Last time we saw Rambo, he wasn't doing too good. He was losing a lot of blood on the back of that horse.
And you kind of wonder, right? A part of you that loves the character, you kind of like, whatever happens to the character? What happens after that? What happens at, you know, like the end of Creed, like when he goes to his, I don't want to give away the ending, but right. What happens to the character after that? You know, I'm sure you've wondered that before.
Many times. So let me throw this scenario at you. Rocky 1, Rocky 2. Let's even go Rocky 4. Rocky 1 and Rocky 2. He's running through the streets, goes up the Rocky steps, full blast. Second one, the kids are all around him. He's jumping up and down. The camera cuts away, and we see Apollo Creed sulking the night before the fight. Now, let's go back to Rocky dancing on the steps with the kids. When he stops jumping up and down, and they stop screaming his name, what happens next? Now, I want you to picture Rocky standing there looking at all the kids, and he's breathing heavy. How do I get home? Does Paulie pick him up? What is the next thing? He just ran all these miles through Philadelphia. Does he get a cab? There's no Uber. Does he get a bus? Adrian doesn't drive. Does Paulie come in the Trans Am and get him? Let's go to the mountain.
I remember you saying this in another interview, right? A lot of people don't realize the distance that he ran, right?
The distance in Rocky 2 that he runs is nearly 38 miles because they do a lot of repeating. No boxer would run more than 5 miles, okay?
Yeah.
So, which was more reminiscent in the first movie. But anyways, let's go to Rocky 4. Rocky 4. Now, you probably don't get much of a chance to run in the snow where you're at, but I can tell you, on the Northeast, running in snow up to your knees is hellacious. You can go about 15 feet before you keel over. So let's say Rocky's in the shape of his life, which he is. He's running through the flat snow, goes through rivers, goes through the forest, up the side of a cliff. He's on top of the mountain, screaming Drago as the sun is setting, no less. And then he's got to get all the way back to the damn cabin. How does he get back to the cabin? It boggles
crazy, huh?
It drives me crazy. I have brought this up in dozens and dozens of interviews across the world. No one's given me an answer. So that's on my list. Now, knowing Stallone the way that I do, he's going to say, "You're overthinking it, Mike. Just cut to the next scene." You know?
Well, you've also mentioned in another interview that what they could have done is all the running scenes in Rocky, that could have been kind of like a collage of maybe 2 or 3 training sessions, right? You think? I'm really full run.
Yeah, I'm really glad you noticed that, because that's another thing, and I don't have any. This is just my gut feeling. This is another question I'd like to ask, Lai. So, whenever we see Rocky, like the first one and the second one, and it cuts. 1 minute he's hitting the speed bag, then he's doing the one-arm push-ups, then he's lifting, doing some flies with the shoulders and so on, and then we see him running. I believe every time the scene cuts to another training moment, I believe that is signifying another day of training for the fight. I do not believe every single day Rocky is running 35 miles. I don't believe that. I believe his route is, in fact, 5 miles, and we are just seeing him at different times and locations during the 5-6 weeks of training. That's my thought. I could be wrong. Maybe Stallone intended it differently. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think you've watched it so many times. You've analyzed it to a time. I'm curious, how many times have you watched the Rocky movies? And at this point, is it still for enjoyment, or is it because of your job, doing the tours and everything, that you're trying to look for tidbits? Like, what is it at this point in your life? Enjoyment or work?
All of it. All of it.
Okay.
So the original Rocky I saw well over 600 times. To tell you any number above 600, I would be making it up. I don't know what that number is. I venture to think it's close to 900 or 1,000 times I've seen the original Rocky. But I stopped counting in the late 80s.
Okay. Holy cow.
Okay. So I watched it a lot on VCR early on. Okay.
Now, here's the other question. Did you watch it all the way through, or are you like a lot of us where we fast forward to the training scenes and the inspirational stuff?
No, the training scenes are the least I watch. The things I watch all the time were the love scenes with Rocky and Adrian, the way he would move on the ice with Adrian, the way he would kind of talk to Paulie in the bar, the way he and Gazzo would engage. Those scenes mean more to me than the training montage or the fight. Now, once I get my fill of the love story, I then go to the training and the montage, of course, of the fight. No doubt. No doubt.
Well, I think the kind of person you are is you can appreciate the art of it, I think, and the storytelling, right? Versus
of course. Yeah. That's why I don't care for Rocky 4. It's my least favorite Rocky movie.
Well, we're gonna get into that, because I've heard that in many interviews. I'm like, wait a minute, Mike. I think you have a problem now. You don't like Rocky 4. So okay. I was gonna get into this later, but I think since we're on the Rocky train.
You got it.
Yeah. In a perfect scenario, I would love to analyze all the Rockies. However, I know that would take forever. So let's do this instead.
Sure.
How would you rank the Rockies all the way to Rocky Balboa? Of course, not counting Creed, just from one through Balboa at the end.
Rocky 1. And again, I have to preface this by saying there is no Rocky 1. There is only Rocky.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so
it makes sense.
So it's only Rocky. Then it goes to Rocky 2, then Rocky 3. There is no Roman numeral 1 next to Rocky. Okay?
Exactly.
However, because what I do for a living, I deal with thousands of people all year long. And some of them are really self-described hardcore Rocky fans. So, but they call Rocky 1 Rocky 1. And because I am so ingrained when I talk to them, so we know exactly what movie we're talking about, I say Rocky 1, Rocky 2. Because when I say Rocky, they'll think I mean Rocky Balboa. You see what I'm saying?
I see. Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
So for you and anyone listening, please forgive me saying Rocky 1. I know it's not necessarily Rocky 1. However, here's something interesting. I have a copy of the original notebook Stallone used. It's about, I don't know, I'm looking at it right now. It's maybe about 35 or 40 handwritten pages of Rocky. And it's a red Mead notebook, spiral bound, and on the front, in Stallone's handwriting, is Rocky Roman numeral 1.
Interesting. You know what it is, though? When you think about it, though, now that, just talking to you, it's making me think a lot. No one calls Rambo 1. No one calls Rambo 1. They just say Rambo. Or I think was it First Blood? The first one?
Right. Yeah, we see that's the difference. It's a different name. All the other ones are Rambos. But the first one is First Blood. You could argue maybe they should have been called Second Blood, Third Blood, Fourth Blood. You know what I mean? They could make that argument. Anyways, getting back to Rocky, here's how I list them. Rocky, Rocky 2, Rocky Balboa, Rocky 3, Rocky 5, Rocky 4.
Wow. Okay, so let's repeat that again. Rocky
2.
Okay.
Rocky Balboa.
Okay.
Rocky 3.
Okay.
Rocky 5. Rocky 4. Now, why? To put this in perspective, recently Stallone is on record saying Rocky 4 is his second to least favorite Rocky.
Yeah, I know Rocky 5 he's not proud of, right? He is not... is it true that he didn't think that he should have done that one? He regrets it?
Regret is a very interesting word. I've heard in a
couple interviews. Yeah, I've heard a couple interviews where I wouldn't, maybe not regret, but I would say he wasn't that into it out of all of them.
Yeah, there was a lot going on during Rocky 5. And remember, he had written Rocky 5 to die. And halfway through filming, the producer said, no, you can't kill Rocky. You don't kill James Bond, you don't kill Frankenstein, and you cannot kill Superman. So therefore, Rocky must live. Good decision.
I'm glad he did it. I'm so glad he did it.
Of course. But again, Sly, he was more involved with girls, other projects going on. He wanted to move into comedy. He wanted to bury Rocky because Rocky was too much of an albatross around his neck at that time. Now, since then, he has embraced this as truly his best friend, as he has said in many, many interviews and award ceremonies. And that's and believe me, no one is more happy about it than myself.
I think, here's my thing. I know you appreciate the art and the storytelling. That's probably why Rocky 4. Let's analyze Rocky 4 and 5 a little bit.
Sure.
For me, I'm a kid of the 80s, so I grew up in the 80s, and Rocky 4. If I can be honest now, I guess from from an older point of view, not from a kid. I think from a kid, you're like, oh, Rocky 4, because the big Russian and everything. But now that I look at it, I guess if you're looking at it from a story standpoint, maybe Rocky 4 might not be the greatest, but I think people relate to that one. And I've also heard, Rocky 3 is kind of looked down upon Rocky fans as well, like hardcore, diehard Rocky fans. But I think the lesson from Rocky 3 is, that's why I've always told people the Rocky series is such a perfect story the way it was told, because you have the underdog in 1, and then you have Rocky 2 where the rematch, and then Rocky 3 he gets comfortable, which a lot of people do when they become successful and they've done it all, and then he has to fight through that to come back, and there's someone that's hungrier, which is Mr. T. And and then you come to Rocky 4, and then that's kind of like, I guess wouldn't you say it's more like more of an 80s cluster of soundtrack, of video montage, like, wouldn't you say that's kind of how Rocky 4 is?
Sure, it's very jingoistic Americana pop culture at that time. It's a popcorn 80s movie. Everything is over the top. I mean, from their ridiculously perfect abdominals, their serrated everything. They're as ridiculous as their bodies are, and I say that in a tone of admiration.
Yeah.
Nobody has bodies like that, okay? Like, there's no actor in Hollywood that had that for that length of time. Nobody had bodies.
There's no boxer that's built like that, right?
Right. There are no heavyweight boxers like that. Like, okay, Marvin Hagler. He had a body like that, but he wasn't a heavyweight. He was about 160 pounds. Although Stallone was only 180 pounds in Rocky 4. Sly is not that big. Like, he was much bigger in Balboa and Rambo 4. He was about 217 in those movies. So he really got jacked. But Sly walks around at about 175, 185. And he's got great shoulders and arms, and he's got a huge back. Trust me, when I was up close, I saw the size of his back. I could not believe. I mean, there was like Patrick Media billboards weren't this big. Like, they were huge. He just
were you picturing Rambo 3 when you looked at his back? You know, that part where he ties the
of course,
stuff around his head,
the bandana. It's even bigger because he was in a relaxed state. His arms were at his side, and the lats were so wide. I remember saying to myself, I could not believe two things. When I was at dinner on the set of Balboa, when they filmed it at the Victor Cafe, which is the restaurant used as Adrian's for all Balboa and the Creeds, you could have dinner. They filmed there for 3 weeks. And on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, you could book a table with all the live Rocky props around you. And you could have dinner. And every night, Saturday and Sunday, Stallone came in for dinner. And he was there. And you could talk to him. And I mean, he was working somewhat, but he also was pretty accessible. And I remember getting up very close to him and saying to myself, oh my God, the size of his back was ridiculous. And the size of his head was the size of a microwave oven. It was huge, okay? So I remember his head was so big, and I have this in my mind. So last year we go to California. We go out to maybe you want to get to the movie The Pretender a little later. So we were out in California for a little while, and I went to a place called Barron's Hollywood Hats. And this is where Stallone, for Rocky 5, because the Rocky hat had fallen apart. So he had them mimic it for Rocky 5. They made a brand new one for Rocky 5, and they made it look old. They also made the Rocky Balboa hat, which is a brown Irish tweed hat with a herringbone trim. It was made in a mill in Cheshire, England. Anyways, there were 3 hats made. And Stallone wore all 3 hats at different times. They were backups, but he did wear them. Anyways, one of them was there in the case. And I know Mark Major, the guy who runs Barron's Hats, and he takes the hat out, and he gives it to me to wear. I couldn't
man.
pull it. I couldn't pull it over my head. My head was bigger than Stallone's, and my wife was with me, and she goes, "Oh my God!" I'm looking at a picture of it right now. It is stretched as tight as it can go on my head, and I can't get it down past my hairline. It's crazy.
You have a head like me. It's called a Hawaiian head. Yeah, Hawaiian weight. I have a big head growing up. I was one of those kids that I was weighed down
funny.
because of my head. You know?
Really?
That's so crazy. But Rocky. I guess going back to Rocky, if you did have a favorite scene from Rocky 4, what would it be? Because there's so many iconic scenes, right? Even though it was commercially, but what would be your favorite scene? Even though I know that's your least favorite Rocky of them all.
No easy way out. No easy way out montage.
Oh man.
You know, I thought the Jalpa Lamborghini, which coincidentally, the Jalpa that he drove, it was the crappiest Lamborghini made, but because it had a unique sound, Stallone went with it.
Oh, the starting the red and everything?
Everything, yes. You would think it didn't matter what car you have, you just put the sound effects in. But for whatever reason, that and several other reasons, Stallone decided to go with this Jalpa Lamborghini. The car in general always broke down. It was a real problem for Lamborghini. But anyways, I would say that montage was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. I appreciated it. And don't forget, when I'm 18 years old and I'm in the movie theater in 1985 watching Rocky come out, I'm saying to myself, oh my God, this is incredible. But again, it was the only Rocky movie never filmed in Philadelphia. Nothing in Philly is there except the montage where we have references of Philly in the montage there.
You know, it's funny you would say that scene because I think a lot of people would say, oh, it's got to be the barn or it's got to be the running in the snow and the going up the mountain. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've watched those two scenes that I know that there's a break in between scenes where he sees Adrian in the snow for the first time or after a long train. And man, my VHS tape at the time or even my DVD, I mean, I went through it so much before I went to go running outside. So for you, before you did a lot of your running outside, and I know there were some steps nearby where you lived.
Yeah,
I watched the documentary. I'm not gonna give it away, but did you watch any scene in particular that would get you hyped up before you got outside?
Oh, Rocky, the Rocky movie. Yeah. The original Rocky, that's what I would watch. Rocky 4 doesn't motivate me. Nothing about Rocky 4 motivates me. Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 and Balboa, that's what motivates. But as a kid, before I would go running through the cold streets of Scranton in the morning, I would get up around 4:30 in the morning and I would drink the raw eggs and I would watch on VCR just a few moments of Rocky getting ready to run to the streets of Philadelphia. And that's what I would do. I would dress in the tattered gray sweats, the Chuck Taylors, and I would wrap my hands like he did as a boxer, and I would go running in the morning before school. And that was my inspiration. That's how I dealt with the fear I had of being, picked on. But the one thing I'll say about Rocky 4, one thing I love, and it always makes me smile, when we hear the opening of Hearts on Fire, and you hear the whirling of the jump rope. I just gave myself chills at that moment. I do love that moment. Now, people ask me all the time when I do these live videos from my basement and whatever. This is where I have my big Rocky room. There's an artist out there whose name is John Rivoli. He's a dear friend of mine. I love this guy. And he has a particular take on the character and his art. I've never seen art done his way. I have maybe 15 or 20 of his paintings, or prints, I should say. And I have one that's a 40 by 60. And it's that iconic scene, it's the biggest one I have on my wall. It's Rocky standing over Drago when he knocks him out through the ropes. We see it for 1 second in Rocky 4 at the end of the fight. Yeah. And I have this here, and people say, Mike, if you hate Rocky 4, why is this the biggest painting on your wall? Number one, I don't hate Rocky 4. I don't hate it. I love it. I just love it less. That's all. Okay?
Yeah. It's
so
like
the
kids, right? I mean, you gotta love them all equally, but there's some that maybe not your
exactly
top of your list, right?
Exactly. You get one kid that shovels the sidewalks for all the old people. You got another kid who cuts the grass in the summertime. And then you get the third kid who's, when he's 14, he steals the car keys and he gets his girlfriend pregnant and he's just out of control. You know what I mean? So
that's
Rocky
Rocky
Four. Rocky Four is out of control. Okay? But the reason I have this picture here, and I've said this many times, when Rocky's his challenge is putting Drago down, okay? To me, that is every battered woman who's tried to get out of a bad relationship. That is every one of us who has been sick, had cancer, beaten it, been faced with some type of life-altering disease. This is everyone who's ever been passed over for a job they should have had, or every boss who screwed us over because they were jerks. That's what that painting represents to me. Because my favorite moment in all the Rockies and Creeds is round 14 when Apollo Creed knocks Rocky down, and Rocky knows all he wanted to do was be standing at the end of the fight. He gets up, he waves Apollo in, and at that moment, Carl Weathers sells that moment better than anybody else. He shakes his head, and he's like, damn, I just put this man down, and he's up, and he wants more.
I remember that.
When Rocky waves him in, and he's squatting. Rocky is almost, his legs are so wide in the corner to hold himself up. He's as stable as he's going to get, and he's tucked in, and he's just looking at that one eye, and Apollo throws a punch, and Rocky comes up, and he shatters Apollo's ribs. It's amazing.
Well, then you look at that scene, and then like you talked about with Apollo kind of shaking his head and be like, what do I have to do? And then that's when you start seeing the respect from Apollo, right? I mean, respect kicks in, and it's like, oh,
you got it.
Let's finish the fight.
Exactly. Finish this bum and let's go home. As man. Duke would say.
Yeah. Now, Rocky 4. Now, let's get into Rocky 5 for a bit.
Sure.
My feeling on Rocky 5 is for some reason, I've always liked Rocky 5. I remember, it came out in the early 90s. Was it 1990 it came out? Rocky 5?
90. Yeah, 90.
Yeah. Yep. And I remember watching it, and first of all, this is going to sound cheesy, and I know a lot of the Rocky fans are going to be like, oh, Damon does not know what he's talking about. He shouldn't be talking to Mike right now. But I love the soundtrack. I did love the Go For It. I still work out to it to this day. I felt like closer to the character in Rocky 5. Like, it really pulled on my heartstrings because that moment when his son, which was, of course, Sage Stallone in real life, that moment when his son, kind of, I guess, tells him off, and you can see the hurt in him, the hurt in his face, and, oh, what do you mean, Like, I thought we were a whole team and blah, blah,
Damon,
blah.
Hang on a second. Damon, hey, hang on. If we're breaking up, I only got a little bit of what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong. It sounded like you said you liked the soundtrack to Rocky 5. Is that what you're telling me?
You were probably hoping it was breaking up. Okay. Well, I got to rephrase.
No, come on. I'm teasing. I'm only teasing.
I don't like the soundtrack. I like Go For It. I
okay.
That way. Yeah, I like Go For It.
I like Go For It. I do. I appreciate it. Here's the thing. When it comes down to choosing your favorite Rocky, your favorite soundtrack, whatever it is, it's so personal. We are so different. I get a lot of people that say Rocky 4 is their favorite, but then that tells me all I need to know about that person. And it's not good or bad. It just tells me what I need to know, where you are as a person.
What they value more, I guess, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
For me, Rocky 4 is a DeLorean with, time travel capacity. When I sit and watch Rocky 4, I remember being a very lonely senior in high school going in 1985 to see it by myself in a movie theater. I remember the struggles, and I remember how hard my life would be for the next 20 years because I did not really have much to offer society in way of life skills, jobs, whatever it is. So, when it comes to Rocky IV, there is a deep love for Rocky IV. But,
The time machine.
The time machine. Now, Rocky V, I love Rocky V because it at least comes back to Philly. He's got the hat and the coat on. By the way, did you know there were 3 Rocky coats? The leather coat from 1, 2, and Rocky V. Those are 3 different coats. The original coat was, as were all the clothes in the original Rocky movie, those clothes, that was all Sylvester Stallone's clothes. That was his winter coat. The studio offered no money for wardrobe. There was no wardrobe allowance for the actors, so they had to provide their own clothes. Now, the other actors, they had money that they could spend because they were established, and Stallone had no money, so he used what was in his closet. For Rocky II, they made a identical leather jacket in case something were happened to the first one. And then in the 5th Rocky, they made yet another one. Why? I don't know. There was nothing wrong with the first one. It was just fine, but that's Hollywood.
And that was part 1 of my interview with Mike Kunda, Rocky interpreter, ambassador of Rocky Land, and just an overall big fan of everything Rocky. I hate to do this to you guys. I know I was getting into the conversation too, and we ended up going way longer than planning that we would, because I could talk to the guy forever. So I decided that we need to make this 2 parts to keep you guys in a little suspense. Part 2 will be coming out on Thursday. And part 2, he's going to be talking about his wife, how she deals with the craziness of his obsession, his passion on a daily basis. I mean, can you imagine living with Rocky Balboa every day? That's gotta be crazy. He talks about the documentary on his life, The Pretender. Also talks about his tours in Philly that he offers to take Rocky fans to different locations that was shot in the movie. There's so much more in part 2. So again, it's coming out on Thursday, part 2. Make sure you follow us on Instagram if you're not already, at The Show Podcast. And also follow us on YouTube, youtube.com/The Show. And we'll see you on part 2. As Mike would say, keep punching.